Tell me when you're ready. Okay, we're on the record. Ms. Schaefer's lining up the jurors. Is there anything that anybody needs to be put on before we bring in?
No, Judge.
Okay. The jurors did complain about visualization. I can't solve all that problem, but they also said at times they couldn't hear. So you might take that into your thing to make sure that everybody can hear. I mean, we can hear, but we're not encased in plexiglass. And it seemed to be the ones in the second row.
Are we still committed to leaving that front plexiglass?
I can't fix it because of our existing executive order, and this is a communal courtroom. If we were in my courtroom, I could do it. But since this is a catch-all courtroom for everybody, I can't. And I've gone round and round with administration about it.
Okay.
Somehow, I just don't know if anyone tripping on this cord. There's a cord here, guys. Be aware. Diane. There's a cord that stretches. I just don't want to trip.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, she didn't sit you guys down. Be seated. I hope you guys, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you had a wonderful lunch. We're going to drive on till, I think my deal was, what, 2:30 or 3:30? 3:30. Okay? Well, you got to sleep in this morning. I don't want to hear about it. Okay? Okay. We'll probably take a break, bid that time. 10-minute break so you guys can stretch your legs for a second, but we're going to start in with the evidence. Mr. Zion, are you ready to call your first witness?
We are, Your Honor. State Call Detective Bill Gillette to the stand.
Don't trip. Okay. Take, come on up. You gotta be careful there. You need to raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, make yourself comfortable there. I was going to ask you to lower your mask. You're in an encased area there. I need you to state your name for the record and spell it for me so that the court reporter can get your picture.
Detective William Gillette. It's Gillette.
The first name?
William, William.
Okay. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Detective Gillette, where are you employed?
Columbus Police Department.
And what is your official title now?
Right now, I'm working in homicide cold case
And how long have you been in that position?
since 2012.
And prior to that, where were you employed?
Still with the City of Columbus, but I was in our regular homicide unit.
And how long were you in the regular homicide unit?
From 97 to 2012.
Was that your first position with Columbus Police Department, or were there others?
No, I was in patrol from, I came on in 1992, and then to 97 is when I went into homicide.
And prior to that, were you employed in law enforcement anywhere?
No, ma'am.
What type of education or training do you have to hold your position as a detective with Columbus Police Department?
I just have a college degree, and then the rest of it is on the job training.
Okay, college degree in what, sir?
Marketing,
And when did you obtain that?
1990.
And then law enforcement training specific, did you go to the police academy?
Police academy, yes, ma'am.
And straight from there into Columbus Police Department?
Correct.
Tell us a little bit about what your current job duties are as a cold case homicide detective.
Cold case, when we work our cold cases, it's it's cases that we didn't start working, but some other detectives did. And maybe they've, run into a brick wall. They just couldn't go any further, with the case. They'll assign it to us and we'll look at it. We'll review it. We'll assess it to see if there's anything else that we can do, with the case. Interview witnesses, see if there was any DNA at the time that that can be tested now, fingerprints, stuff like that.
How did that differ from what you did as a normal homicide detective?
Normal homicide detective is we'd get called and you would get to the scene as fresh homicide. You would work the scene, interview any witnesses, process the scene with CSSU. And if you had any suspects at the time, you would interview them also, collect any evidence. So a regular homicide is from basically you start at the beginning, until the end. Our cold case is you come in after, another detective has worked it for a while and see what you can do with it.
Now, would a cold case also include something that is discovered maybe years to months after the victim died?
Yes.
Is that what occurred in the current case we're here on today?
Well, how this occurred, you want me to go into how?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Ron O'Brien was the prosecutor at the time here in Franklin County, and Jimmy Lowe was an assistant prosecutor. On December 6th, I got a call from Mr. Lowe, myself and Detective Pennington and Sergeant McConnell asking to come down to their office down here because they had a situation that they wanted to talk to us about involving a doctor at Mount Carmel West Hospital.
Okay, and you said December 6th. What year was that, sir?
2018.
Okay, so you came and spoke to the prosecutor first?
Yes.
What did you gather as far as what your investigation would encompass from that?
Well, what we were told was, like I said, there were two instances. One was November 19th of 2018, where a victim by the name of Miss Walls got 1,000 micrograms of fentanyl. And then the very next day, November 20th, there was another victim that got 2,000 micrograms of fentanyl. And an attorney, Greg Peterson, for Mount Carmel West, reached out to Mr. O'Brien and said, hey, we would like you to look at this to see if there's anything criminal, with this. And so what Mr. O'Brien did is he contacted my deputy chief, which is Tim Becker, and asked if he could use our homicide cold case squad. Mr. O'Brien knew that this was going to be a lengthy investigation. And at the time, we had had quite a few homicides, record homicides in 2017 and 18 in the regular squad. So he asked if we could do this because he knew it was going to be a lengthy investigation.
All right, and that was December 6th of 2018. From that information, did you develop a preliminary suspect that you were going to be dealing with?
Yes, it was Dr. William Husel.
And do you see that individual in the courtroom here today?
Yes, ma'am.
Could you please point to him and tell us what he's wearing?
Judge, we stipulate to identification.
So stipulated.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Ladies and gentlemen, a stipulation's an agreed fact, okay? Everything else you use your weight and credibility to evaluate, but a stipulation is you're to take it as a true statement. So they just agreed that it was the defendant that was being identified.
What did you do next in the course of your investigation?
We set up a meeting on December 7th, which would have been the next day, to go to Mount Carmel. It's I can't remember what it's called, but it's on Broad Street. It's across from the hospital. It's their kind of operation center over there to talk to Dr. Larry Swanner and an attorney, Dan Hackett, who is an attorney with Mount Carmel. So it was those two. It was myself, Sergeant McConnell, Ann Pennington, and Detective Dana Courtroom that went and met with these guys in the afternoon.
And that brings up a point that I want to talk about. Was it just you handling this cold case investigation, or was it a team of detectives with Columbus Police Department?
No, it was our whole team. In cold case at that time, we had 4 of us. There was myself, Detective Dana Courtroom, Detective Ann Pennington, and Detective Jay Fulton, and Sergeant McConnell. And so we all worked this together because it was such a big case.
All right, so you met with I believe you said Dr. Swanner and who else?
Attorney Dan Hackett and Greg Peterson was there, the attorney that they hired, and also Greg Slimmer.
And from that meeting, were you able to determine where the patients were at the time they died?
Yes, Mount Carmel West Hospital,
And do you know the address to Mount Carmel West?
793 West State Street,
And what city, county, and state is that in?
Columbus, Ohio, Franklin County.
Okay, and Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Did you show the other side what you showed?
Yes, I showed them that before we even started, Your Honor. Detective Gillette, I'm handing you what's marked for identification as State's Exhibit 15BB. Can you identify that for us?
Yeah, that's Mount Carmel West.
And does that photograph show Mount Carmel West in the same or similar condition as you saw it that day?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, permission to publish for the jury?
No objections.
Thank you.
May.
It's up on the screen, sir.
What do we need to do?
He controls that.
Okay.
I keep hitting 2 all.
There.
This is 1,
15.
15 BB.
15 MB.
Yes.
We'll get you an exhibit list.
Yes, please, thank you so much.
Great picture of me.
Yeah. Try that.
Okay, this thing is acting funny.
You want me to hit? Is it bigger?
Here's the overhead.
It won't even let me in
I have presentation mode here, Judge.
hit presentation mode, left front, law front,
Left, lower, right.
and then to all. It's up on that screen, but it's not up on the big
I
screen.
was gonna say it's showing up in ours also, Your Honor.
Well, I guess we're gonna have to go old
Old
style.
school it is, Your Honor.
Can you get the overhead on?
I don't know that I can get the overhead on.
You can switch to that. You can turn this on.
I tried, it didn't want to switch earlier.
Hit cart front and to off.
There we go. See if that'll do it.
I don't know, you might just have to,
Old school,
old
hold it
school
up.
it.
All right,
Yeah.
hang on, let's switch.
It's showing his computer in the back, and for some reason it shouldn't.
There we go.
There we go.
That's it.
All right.
Oh, that's the overhead.
All right, there we go. We've got it figured out. All right. This shows Mount Carmel West in the same or similar condition as you saw it that day.
Correct, yes.
And is this building currently standing?
No, ma'am.
When did that happen, that they shut it down?
Shortly after this, I want to say it was maybe in 2019 that they opened the Grove City
Okay.
location.
All right, so after your December 6, 2018 meeting, what did you do from there?
Well, we went and had the meeting on December 7th and
Okay.
talked to Mr. Hackett and Dr. Swanner. And they kind of explained to us that they had 2 incidents where Dr. Husel had ordered. One was 1,000 micrograms of fentanyl. The other was 2,000 micrograms of fentanyl. And they wanted us to look into this to see if there was anything criminal about this.
What did you do after that?
We also asked them if we could set up to start talking to the nurses and pharmacists, that would have been under the defendant, while he was working there at Mount Carmel. So that evening, we had the meeting about 1:30 or 2. We went from that meeting on the 7th back to Mount Carmel at 793 downtown here, and we started interviewing nurses and pharmacists. And we continued that from the 7th. We came back in the 8th. And then we also interviewed them on December 10th. And there were a few more after that came, that we couldn't get during those time periods. But we ended up interviewing all of the nurses and pharmacists that would have been working during that time period.
Okay, so approximately how many hospital employees did you interview over the course of this investigation?
With the nurses, doctors, and probably around 30 or so. I have 75 total interviews done, but we also interviewed the families of the victims also. So those were all included in the case package.
All right, and just to be clear, when you say we interviewed them, you're talking about your entire cold case detective team that was helping with the interviews.
Correct. What we did is we broke up into teams, and we would start interviewing the nurses, pharmacists, and things like that to get through them quicker, because there was quite a few of them.
Now, when you first started these interviews, did you have access to all of the medical records of all the potential patients who could be involved in this?
No, we did not at the time we started.
Why not?
Because they just didn't have everything at that point. We knew about, like I said, Miss Walls and Miss Penix, and we knew the amounts that were used there. But what they were able to do for us is they were able to give us, in some instances, one of the nurses, they might tell us, okay, this nurse was working on this night, when Dr. Husel was working, and they used this much fentanyl, this much Versed, or whatever the medications were. And then we would just go in and talk. They didn't have any names, but they were able to give us the amounts. And so we would go in and talk to them to see if they would remember this, ask them any questions, about this, everything that they could tell us.
In the majority of cases, were they able to remember those patients, if not by name, by circumstance?
Some were, and most of them were not able to, no.
At some point, did you obtain the medical records of the possible victims in this case?
Yes, once we were able to establish when Mount Carmel apparently did the audit to give us some names, then we were able to fill out subpoenas and get medical records from all of these individuals.
So that would be pursuant to an investigative or a grand jury subpoena?
Correct.
How long does it typically take to get medical records when you're using one of those subpoenas?
Depending on where it's at, it could take a week up to 3 weeks, or maybe even longer. It just kind of depends.
Do you remember what day you were able to obtain at least the majority of the medical records on?
No, we obtained records throughout the whole investigation, but we were able to, the state was able to get experts, and one of them was Dr. Roth, who works with Trinity, which is part of Mount Carmel. And he was able to go through and look at some of the charts once they got everything, the medical records. And then they put together a list of victims that they wanted us, looking into.
And let's be clear, Dr. Roth works for Trinity, so
Correct.
that's over Mount Carmel, is that correct?
Correct.
Did the state consult with other experts who were not employed by Mount Carmel in order to make a determination on whether they were a victim or not?
Yes, they did.
Foundation, move to strike.
Okay.
He hasn't, I don't want to give a speaking objection, but just to clarify the foundation, we don't know if this witness was in the position to be made aware as to what the state was doing. And she hasn't laid that foundation, I think.
I'll roll. This is a transition.
Thank you, Your Honor. Were you aware of whether or not the state was obtaining expert witnesses to look at the medical records?
Yes, they did.
And did they in fact do that? Experts.
Pardon me?
Did the experts in fact look at the medical records?
Yes, they did.
From there, were you able to determine a number of victims that you were looking at for criminal cases?
Yes, we were.
How many of those were there initially?
Initially, there were 35 that we were
And
looking at.
what happened after that?
As the experts were looking, they narrowed it down to 25. And then today we're here for 14.
And at some point out of those 14 victims, did Columbus PD obtain photographs of each of them?
Yes, we did.
And Your Honor, if I may approach?
Mayor?
And I'm handing you what I marked right in the patient states exhibit 1A. Could you identify that for us?
Yes, that's Joanne Belisari.
that's one of the potential victims
Yes, ma'am.
that show her in the same or similar condition as the date you obtained the photographs.
Correct, yes.
And Your Honor, permission to publish?
No objection, it's, if it moves things
Well,
along easier
can
for
we just
council.
show
we-
them all of them?
Sure. Okay,
And then we publish them as we go?
State's Exhibit 2A,
That's Ryan Hayes.
and again, shows it in the same or similar condition as when you obtained it.
Yes, ma'am.
State's Exhibit 3A,
Judge, we would have no objection to the publishing and admission of these photos. It's been shown to me. We have no problem.
that's fine by us, Your
Okay.
Honor.
We're kind of doing a shortcut, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, usually we'd go through and identify each picture. They're just agreeing that these are the pictures, so. Now we have to see the technology will work. No,
So, Your Honor, just for the record, then, we have a stipulation to the authenticity and ultimately what will be the admission of State's Exhibit 1A through 14A.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
okay. Were you gonna show them or?
But we're gonna try that, or we should do the overhead?
I got the screen up where she can show them.
Yeah, let's use the overhead.
Okay, so Detective Gillette, you indicated that was Joanne Belisari, State's Exhibit 1A.
Correct.
And 2A, I believe you've already identified as Ryan Hayes.
That's correct, yes.
3A, Beverly Schertzinger.
Yes, ma'am.
4A is
Donnie Millette. Danny, I'm sorry.
5A,
Brandy McDonald.
6A,
Francis Burke.
7A,
Jeremy Sue Hodge.
8A,
James Allen.
9A,
Troy Allison.
10A,
Bonnie Austin.
11A,
James Timmons.
12A,
Sandra Castle.
13A,
Rebecca Walls.
and 14A.
Melissa Penix.
And Ms. Penix and Ms. Walls were the one you indicated that the hospital had given you initially.
Correct, yes.
When did you become aware of the other potential victims?
It was shortly after we started interviewing the nurses and pharmacists that they had developed a list for us. And then we were getting those medical records, as soon as we got the names, from that list.
And did you interview the nurses and pharmacists who were involved in all of these victims' cases?
Yes, ma'am.
After reviewing and after interviewing all of these witnesses and reviewing the medical documents, as well as getting information from the experts the states had consulted with, did you have a defendant or a suspect at that time?
Yes, ma'am.
And who was that?
Dr. William Husel.
So that has remained consistent throughout.
Correct.
Detective Gillette, when you interviewed these hospital personnel, all the employees, was this the first time that they were interviewed by anybody?
No, ma'am.
Okay, tell us about that.
It was our understanding that the hospital, and I don't know who it would have been at the hospital, but they had already started talking to the nurses and pharmacists, by the time that we started talking with them.
Is that how you would prefer to do a criminal investigation?
No, we would like to talk to them first, but in this case, that it's just not how it happened. So, we just did the best we could with what we had at that time.
How did that affect your investigation, or did it?
I don't think it really did. I think they would have told us the same thing, prior to them being interviewed by the hospital versus us, talking to them first.
And once you obtained the medical records, was there anything that stuck out from these interviews that were incorrect in comparison to the medical records?
No, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. No further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Bias?
May it please the court? Prosecutor. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Happy birthday. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Detective Gillette, you mentioned that this was a cold case, correct?
Well, yes, we
That's the way it was
got
treated.
we got asked to do it. Our homicide cold case unit got asked to look into this.
And it's your training and experience, and in fact, you're even in a specific squad that is used to handling cases further down the line,
Correct.
okay? Now, before I actually go any further, you kept referring to the patients as victims. Do you recall that?
Mhm.
Okay, you have to say yes for the court.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Now, of course, we haven't had a trial yet, right? Is that
Yes.
Okay, so that's really for the jury to decide whether they're victims or patients, correct?
That we felt they were victims, so that's why I said victims.
Okay, but I'm correct when I say it's for the jury to decide whether they're patients or victims, right?
Correct.
Okay. So having said that, sir, you mentioned that the way this case started was that Greg Peterson had reached out to Ron O'Brien, who is the elected prosecutor, correct?
Correct. Yes.
And you were, of course, familiar with Mr. Peterson, right?
Yes.
He's a well-known attorney locally.
Yes, sir.
Okay. He's also a former prosecutor of 14 years, correct?
Correct.
And in fact, former judge.
Yes, that is correct.
So he's well-known within these parts.
Yes.
And fair to say he has a good relationship with Mr. O'Brien?
I would have to say yes.
And he was the person who was running point between the hospital and the prosecutors, correct?
Correct.
He is a criminal defense lawyer, right?
Yes.
Okay. He doesn't work for a large healthcare firm, right?
Not
As far
that
as
I'm
you
aware
know? Okay.
of. Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. And when this happened, did that spark your interest as to why a criminal defense lawyer was representing a hospital?
Not really.
Never entered your mind to question that?
No, sir.
Okay, what about the other gentleman who you met with? I think you said his name was Mr. Slimmer?
Yes, sir.
He's a criminal defense lawyer.
Right.
Okay, so two criminal defense lawyers come to you and you're meeting with them as the point of contact between the hospital and Mr. O'Brien's office, right?
Right.
But there was another lawyer there, right?
Yes, Mr. Hackett.
Mr. Hackett's a lawyer, right?
Mhm.
And he works, you have to say yes.
Yes, sorry.
Okay, now, Mr. Hackett wasn't the one that reached out to Mr. O'Brien, right? As far as you know.
As far as I know, correct. Yes.
And he's actually the lawyer for the hospital, right?
Correct. Yes.
And would be most familiar with their process, correct?
Right.
Have you ever handled a healthcare case before?
No, sir.
Ever investigated a doctor before?
No, sir.
Ever investigated a nurse before?
No, sir.
Ever investigated a physician assistant?
No, sir.
A pharmacist?
No, sir.
Okay. And when you got this case, as you mentioned, it was a cold case, right? You have to say yes?
Yes, I'm sorry.
All right.
Yes.
Now, having said that, there was no rush, right?
Well, we wanted to look in to see what was happening at the hospital. So, yeah, there was kind of a rush based on what they had told us had transpired on November 19th and November 20th.
Let's break that down for a second. Dr. Husel was already fired, right? He was
Yes.
fired that day.
Correct, yes.
Okay, so there was no issue with Dr. Husel seeing patients at the time,
Correct.
okay? And you didn't even have a name of the patients, correct?
Correct.
And you also didn't have any medical records.
Right.
So you had absolutely no idea how terminal these patients were.
That'd be fair, yes.
And you had no idea as to what kind of care they received while being at the hospital.
Correct.
Okay. Now, you're a local law enforcement officer, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, you're aware that Mr. Peterson also does federal criminal defense, correct?
I did not, I don't know. I mean, to be honest with you, I'm not sure exactly what all he does.
Okay. During the course of your interviews, you spoke with many pharmacists.
Correct.
Okay. Now, when you spoke to these pharmacists, they told you about their job responsibilities?
Yes, sir.
And you were aware that they are in charge of controlled substances?
Yes.
Okay. And are you aware of what potential laws they may have been responsible for in this case?
No, sir.
Did you ever think of looking into it?
As far as the pharmacist?
Yes.
No, but I mean, just thinking about it, they would be responsible for, approving a medication or something like that. So I would assume that, I'm not sure what you're asking.
Okay, let me try and break it down for you. If they were putting false information in the medical records, that could be a federal criminal offense, correct?
I would assume so, yes.
If they were not controlling controlled substances, that's also something the DEA would investigate, correct?
Correct.
And they would be exposed to that,
Right.
okay? And the hospital, as an entity, could also be held criminally responsible, correct?
I would assume, yes.
Okay, I don't want you to assume. I mean, we're here, we want facts. You know for a fact that an entity could be criminally held liable like a hospital, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay, in fact, right around that time, in 2018, there were quite a number of hospitals being held accountable for opioids, correct?
Counter objection relevancy.
Okay, it's cross. Oh,
What was the question again?
Right around that time, in 2018, there were quite a few hospitals being held criminally responsible for opioids, correct?
I don't know that I can answer that accurately.
As far as you know, you're a police officer.
I know opioids was up, yes. That would be a fair statement, yes.
Did that ever enter your mind that perhaps you might want to take a closer look at what's going on with this hospital?
As far as Mount Carmel,
Yes.
well, we were looking into what was going on. That's why they asked us to come over and have that meeting with them.
That's not the question I asked you. Did it ever enter your mind that you might want to look into what's going on with this hospital in terms of their criminal life?
No, sir.
Okay. In fact, you identified both on direct that Mr. Husel, or Dr. Husel, was the target of the investigation.
Correct.
And it's also a fact that you advised just about each and every witness that you interviewed that Dr. Husel was the target of this investigation.
Correct.
So that's how you went in with Dr. Husel, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, you're aware that pharmacists are 50% responsible for the medications given in this setting, correct?
Yes, sir.
Objection, Your Honor. Facts not in evidence.
overruled.
So, yes, okay. So,
And that's something you knew going into this investigation, or is that something you found out later?
Say that again about the
fact that
pharmacist.
a pharmacist is 50% responsible for a dose, is that a fact you learned before you went into this investigation or after?
I never knew they were responsible for 50%.
Okay, you just testified to this jury a moment ago that you're aware that they are, correct?
No. Okay. I'm not sure what you're trying to ask me.
Detective, if I ask you a question and you don't understand, please just ask me to repeat it or to clarify for you. I'm more than happy to do so. I'm not trying to trick you or anything, okay?
Okay.
Now, my question to you is, were you aware, because you've given two different answers.
Okay.
The first time I asked you if you were aware that pharmacists are 50% responsible for the dose, you said yes, you're aware of that.
I didn't understand. I didn't hear that part of it. You said something. So I misspoke.
Okay,
Okay.
before I go any further, anything else you misspoke about?
No, sir.
Okay, good. Having said that, sir, you still to this day don't know that?
No, sir.
Did you ever look into who's responsible under the law for a dose of medication in a hospital setting,
No, we did not.
even when it's dealing with opioids?
No, we did not.
Now, sir, you mentioned that you were not the first to question these witnesses to a murder, right?
Correct. Yes.
So, in fact, you were the third person to speak to these witnesses, correct?
I don't know about third. I know
Okay,
there
well,
was.
You became aware that Human Resources spoke to these nurses and pharmacists, right?
Correct. Yes.
And they spoke to them before you.
Yes.
You have no idea what they told the employees.
No, sir.
You have no idea if they made any threats to their jobs.
No, sir.
You have no idea how much information they asked them about each specific patient, right?
No, sir.
And they didn't even record those interviews, right?
I don't know about that.
Did you ever ask?
No, we did not.
So you're aware that witnesses to a murder investigation, critical witnesses, are being questioned, and you don't even ask whether they're being recorded?
I don't recall that we did. No.
Okay. What about notes? Did you ask the Human Resource Department for their notes on these interviews?
No, we did not.
But yet you represented to this jury that you don't believe it affected the investigation, right?
I don't believe so. No.
But you can't really say that because you don't have the notes, right?
Correct.
Next question, hold on.
And
Let's ask questions.
Sure.
and
you
send
don't have,
statements.
you also don't have the recordings if they were recorded, right?
Correct.
And you have absolutely no clue what they said to these people.
Right.
You also became aware that risk management spoke with these witnesses, correct?
Maybe yet later. I don't remember when risk management did.
My question to you, as you were questioning these witnesses, they made you aware, and you learned by questioning these witnesses, that risk management had also spoken to them, correct?
Yes.
Okay, now. Sorry, detective. Risk management are basically, I don't want to use the word the lawyers, but the people who are in charge of the rules and regulations at a hospital, right?
I would assume so. Yes. But you said not to assume. I don't know. To be honest with you.
I don't want you to assume.
Right.
So, do you have any idea what risk management at a hospital does?
No.
Do you think that it might have been a good idea to find out who they were and what they did since they were questioning your witnesses to a murder investigation?
Looking back, probably, but no, we did not.
Okay. Now, do you know if risk management recorded these interviews?
No, I do not.
Did you ask?
No, we did not.
Did you ask risk management if they had their notes?
No, we did not.
Are you aware to this very day whether there are notes from risk management?
No, sir.
Now, part of your job as a detective is not only to invest, well, actually, you mentioned that your goal, or what the hospital wanted you to do, was to see if there was any, I want to find your words, give me a second. Sorry, to see if there was anything criminal. Remember that?
Correct, yes.
Okay. In the process of that, it's also important to you to see if perhaps, well, let me strike that. I'm asking that question for you, sorry. Part of your job is to follow the evidence, right?
Correct.
In fact, that's what a good detective does. They follow the evidence, right?
Yes, sir.
They don't go in with a set of blinders, correct?
Correct.
They don't go in saying, this is our target and only our target, right?
We didn't have any other targets that come up during the investigation.
Okay. My question to you is, good detective doesn't go in and say, this is our target and only our target, right?
Correct.
Okay. So if there's evidence that you uncover through the course of your investigation that shows that a person might be innocent, you follow that too, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And there are several things that, let me strike that. When you went into question these witnesses, you don't have a medical background, right?
Correct.
In fact, your background's in, I guess your college degree was in marketing?
Correct, yes.
You didn't learn anything about dosing amounts or any kind of medicine in that curriculum, right?
No, sir.
Okay. And you mentioned you've never investigated a healthcare case before, right?
Correct.
And you mentioned in direct examination that there wasn't just you, there were other detectives, right?
Correct.
Did any of them have a prior history or experience in healthcare?
Not that I know of, no.
Okay. In fact, you couldn't pronounce a good number of these medications that kept coming up, right?
That is correct.
You had never heard of these medications.
Correct.
And you didn't know what these medications were for.
Right.
Okay. You had to rely on what the pharmacists and nurses were telling you, right?
Correct. Well, we look things up too afterwards, we would look them up and look into it, so.
Okay. But I mean, I'm talking about at the time while you're questioning these witnesses, right?
Correct. I mean, we knew what fentanyl was.
Okay. You know what the street drug fentanyl is, right?
Correct.
And you know that there's a difference between that drug and the drugs that are administered in hospitals, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So prior to this case, have you ever had any experience in dealing with the fentanyl that's given at a hospital?
No, sir.
Okay, so did you have a nurse consulting with you while you were asking these questions?
No, we didn't.
Did you have a doctor consulting with you while you were asking these questions to these people?
No, we didn't.
Okay. Any medical professional kind of giving you the ins and outs? Hey, ask them about this, or you may want to ask them about that.
No, sir.
Okay. So if a witness told you something, would you even know whether to follow up on it or not, if it was a medical issue?
Well, once we were done, if we got more information after talking to them, that told us that what they told, said need to be looked into, then we would follow through and look into that.
Okay. So you mentioned that the hospital gave you the records a short time after these interviews?
It was, well, what we had to do was we would have to get a subpoena and then send Mr. Peterson, and he would get the medical records, and then we'd go pick them up, and the expert would look at them at that point.
So it's your testimony that it took you a while to get these records, right?
Yes, sir.
And you could not wait until you got the records before you went and interviewed these people, right?
We didn't want to. We wanted to get in and interview them and at that time and see what we could learn.
And you testified under direct examination that the hospital didn't have these records available for you, right?
Not that night, no.
Okay. Now, you're aware that these medical records are electronic medical records, right?
Correct.
And that it's pretty easy to bring up the actual records, correct?
All I can tell you, sir, is what we were told that night, and we went with what we had at the
And
time.
you were told that by the hospital, right?
Correct.
So, the next thing is, once you got the records, other than trial prep, you never went back and spoke to these nurses and pharmacists when you actually did have the records, right?
A couple nurses we actually did,
Other than trial prep, right?
other than who?
Than trial preparation.
We did. We
Okay.
talked to a couple of them, maybe 4 of them, after the initial interview we did with them.
And that would be Wesley Black,
Correct?
that would be Olivia Bond,
Right.
and that would have been the physician assistant Andrew Hendry, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And there's
Anyone
one
else?
more, Ms. Santos.
Mr. Santos, yes. That all occurred at the state attorney's office, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, and this was further on down the line.
Yes, I believe that was in January.
Okay, but you have 14 cases of murder here, right?
Correct.
Which means that in 14 of these cases, a nurse administered these drugs, right?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Okay, and in the process of this, once you got the medical records, you didn't go back and speak to each and every one of these nurses to get more information about it?
No, we didn't.
In fact, a good chunk of these witnesses couldn't even remember a majority of these cases, right?
That's correct.
You would walk in, speak to a nurse, and only have the dose amount and the date, and some go as far back as 2 years, correct?
Correct.
And they literally had no idea what you were talking about.
Correct.
But you didn't find it was a good idea to go back after you have the records and the names of the patients to see if they could review it and maybe give you some insight as to what was going on with these patients at the time of their death.
Well, the expert got that from the medical records.
That's not what I asked you. You did not go back.
No, I didn't.
Okay. Now, you're aware that the medical records are written by the nurses and doctors and pharmacists, right?
Correct.
Okay, and you're aware that sometimes if you see something in writing, it'll jog your memory, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and of course, depending on how good a note taker the nurse is or pharmacist, that would determine how accurate and effective these records are, right?
Correct.
So if the nurses are not as thorough as can be, one person coming later on and reading them like an expert wouldn't exactly get the full picture, right?
I don't know that I can answer that. I'm not an expert in the medical field, so I don't know.
But you would agree that showing a nurse or a witness to a murder the records would probably have jogged their memory and given you more information than, I don't remember that happened to you.
Objection.
Sustained. No speculation.
Is it good police practice to go back once you have more information to question witnesses to a murder?
Yes, sir.
But
We
you
didn't feel
do
at
that
this
in
time.
case.
Pardon me?
But you didn't do that in this case.
No, we did not.
Okay, you gotta help me out a bit. She's taking down a recording, you both talk at the same time.
Okay. Yes, sir.
He knows better, you now know, so let's make sure that she can get everything down.
Yes, sir.
Okay?
I'm sorry, Judge. I'm sorry, Sam. I'll be much more cognizant of it.
I will say the problem is I have to kind of think about it because I'm hearing different types of thoughts.
Understood. Okay. You testified to this jury under direct examination that you spoke to all of the nurses and pharmacists involved in all 14 of these patients, right?
Correct.
You didn't talk to Tricia Saber, did you?
That name doesn't sound familiar.
Does the fact that that was the nurse in Joanne Belisari ring a bell to you?
No, sir.
Okay, so that's one witness to a murder that you didn't speak to, right?
I would have to see the list. I guess before I answer any more questions, I'd like to see the list of all the nurses. There was over 17 or 18 of them.
Okay, let me ask you this. You knew you were coming to testify on a very big case today, right?
Yes, sir.
And you knew that you had to be familiar with all that was done in this investigation, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Tricia Saber does not ring a bell to you, does it?
Not that I can say no.
Not that, okay.
When you gotta remember also.
But there's no question pending.
Okay.
All right. Nathan Cockeiser, he is a pharmacist, correct?
Could be.
Could be. Okay. Are you aware that he was the pharmacist for Joanne Belisari?
No.
Okay. But you know you didn't speak to him, right?
Correct.
And you know that none of your partners, all four of you, none of you spoke to him either.
Let me say this again. His name does not sound familiar. To answer accurately, I know I did look at this case, but like I said, there's over 18 names. That name does not sound familiar.
Okay, that name doesn't ring a bell to you.
No, sir.
Neither does Tricia Saber.
No, sir.
Okay. How about Emma Young?
I don't think that name does either.
Okay. Are you aware that she's the one that retrieved the drugs in the Timmons case from the Pyxis machine?
No, sir.
Okay. What about Earl Huron? You're not familiar with that?
No, sir.
Are you aware that that person retrieved the drugs in the Timmons case as well?
No, sir.
Jordan Blair.
Yes, sir.
That name sounds familiar.
Yes.
Did you speak to Jordan Blair?
No, we did not.
Okay. And that is a nurse in one of the cases as well, correct?
Correct, but according to the nurses that were in the room that time, Mr. Blair was not in the room when the drugs were administered.
That was Melissa Penix's nurse, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Now, Ms. Penix, you're just referring to, I want to clarify your last statement. You said that he was not in the room when Ms. Penix got the medication, right?
Correct.
But this nurse would know about Ms. Penix's care, right?
Might.
Okay, and if he's her nurse, perhaps he might have some information about her condition, right?
Objection, speculative.
Okay, sustain, rephrase.
I know this is the first time you had a healthcare case, but you're aware, sir, that some of these nurses, that these nurses are the persons who coordinate the care, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and you also learn that they're really the ones who have the most interactions with the patients, right?
Yes.
And you're also aware that they have the most interactions with the patient's families, right?
Correct.
You also became aware during this investigation that one doctor is in charge of 30 beds, correct?
Yes, sir.
So, fair to say, Nurse Jordan Blair would have plenty of information for you on Miss Penix.
Possibly.
Possibly, okay? And you didn't speak to that person either?
Mr. Blair?
Yes.
No, sir.
Okay, so, in fact, you misspoke again when you told this jury that you spoke with all the nurses and pharmacists
Okay,
involved in this case,
that's an
right?
argumentative. That's another question, please.
That was not an accurate statement, correct?
With the nurses that we talked to, yes, we did talk to all of them that we interviewed that evening and throughout the investigation.
I'm aware,
Ones
sir.
you named, no, you're correct.
Okay, I'm aware you talked to the nurses you talked to. My question to you, sir, is you did not speak to all of the nurses and pharmacists involved in these 14 patients, correct?
Correct.
So the information that you gave this jury earlier was not correct when you said that you did.
Sustained.
I'll move on, Judge. All right, if I can have just a moment, I want to make sure I'm getting everything. Now, you mentioned that Dr. Roth from Trinity
Yes, sir.
gave you the names of all of these people, correct?
I can't say it was Dr. Roth. I know we met with him one time and he went over some of the medical records. As far as when we got the list of the names, I cannot tell you, sir, who gave all the names, to Mr. Lowe and Mr. O'Brien. I know we were just, given them those names, and then, we started looking into that, and we also interviewed all of the family members.
Okay. I want to ask you now and break down what you did on each specific patient, if I can.
Gotta mark it if you're gonna show it to them.
Can I see it first?
Sure. This is the same one.
Okay.
Do you have stickers?
What's that?
Do you have stickers? The judge asked you to mark it.
We tried to mark it, but
We did mark it.
I didn't realize you were using it in your exam.
We pre-marked this as defense exhibit MCD1, and it was showed to Ms. Grubb previously as well.
sorry about that.
MCD1?
Yes, MCD. Okay. Now, I want to ask you about a Miss Tracy Young. When you went to question the nurses and pharmacists, did you speak to anyone about Tracy Young?
No, Tracy Young was never on the list that was given to us.
Okay. And in fact, you became aware that Tracy Young was a patient because Dr. Husel's civil lawyer had brought it to the hospital's attention, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then, subsequent to that happening, that's when they gave you Tracy Young's records.
Yeah, that's when Sergeant McConnell picked up, yeah,
And that wasn't until,
that's
Sorry,
when,
I didn't hear you.
that's when Sergeant McConnell picked up Tracy Young's medical records, yes.
and that wasn't until, was it 4 months later?
Yes, sir, it was a while later, yes.
Okay, so 4 months after going in and speaking to everybody in the hospital, you find out about a person named Tracy Young, right?
Yes, sir.
And you became aware that Tracy Young received more fentanyl than any of the people that you had investigated previously, right?
I never looked at Tracy Young's medical records. Like I said, she was not on the list that we were given, and we did not look into her.
My question to you, sir, was you became aware that she got more than everybody else, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, in doing so, after you had this information, did you go back and talk to the nurse and pharmacist and ask about what happened with Tracy Young?
No, we did not.
And when you were questioning all of these nurses and pharmacists, you kept asking, what's a typical dose, correct?
Right?
And each and every time you learned,
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
An exception there?
in fact, I'm a listener, I'm going to ask him what he did with that information.
Okay, let's rephrase the question and sustain.
You became aware that it's patient-specific, correct?
Correct.
So in light of this new information, if it's patient-specific, that made the records so much more important to you, correct?
To the experts, yes.
Okay. Every single nurse and pharmacist is telling you it's patient-specific,
Objection again,
and
hearsay, Your
I
Honor.
haven't finished the question.
Okay, well, she's trying to cut you off before you do it. let's rephrase.
You learned that it's patient specific, and you never went back with the records to get specific, right?
On Tracy Young?
On any of these witnesses, on any of these patients.
No, I did not specifically, no.
Okay. Now, during the course of your investigation, you found out that the first person that this came up about would be Mr. Timmons, correct?
No. It was Miss Walls, Rebecca Walls.
Let me ask the question a little bit more specifically. The first voice report that was done in this case at the hospital was done on Mr. Timmons, correct?
That was correct, but at the time we had the meeting, we did not know about Mr. Timmons, that voicemail, till later.
You found that out when you questioned Talon Schroeder, correct?
Yes,
Okay. He made you aware that he was the one that issued the first voice report, right?
correct.
Isn't it great to know as a detective how a case gets started?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and that sets up a timeline for the investigation that can assist you, right?
Right.
Now, in light of this, you now know from Talon Schroeder that Mr. Timmons was given 1,000 mics of fentanyl, and that was an issue that he brought to his superior's attention, right?
Yes,
You also became aware that his concern was that of diversion, correct?
Objection, hearsay, Your Honor, again.
Okay.
I'll rephrase it.
Rephrase it.
I would agree with you. I'll rephrase it. Sir, during the course of your investigation, it became a fact that one of the issues the first issue that came up with pharmacists was that there might be diversion, correct?
I don't know anything about diversion. No, that's not the first thing that came up, no.
All right. Do you remember speaking with a Mr. Dresbach?
Who?
A Mr. Gregory Dresbach?
Yeah, Dresbach, yes.
Sorry. Let me pull that up. Wait. Do you recall that Mr. Dresbach brought up the issue of diversion?
Objection, hearsay.
It's not hearsay. I'm not offering it for the truth of the matter asserted.
Okay. Then how's it relevant?
Effect on the listener of the investigation, pointing out the deficiencies in the investigation.
Okay, then rephrase your question.
Sure. After questioning Mr. Dresbach, did you become aware that a concern was diversion?
No, I did not.
Okay. Do you recall him mentioning diversion?
I remember somebody saying something about diversion, but no.
Okay. So back to my original question that I was talking about earlier, and as to not having blinders on and a potential liability from the hospital. Once diversion came up, did you go down that road to see if there was diversion?
No, we did not.
Did you ask a follow-up question as to, what do you mean diversion?
I don't. Who interviewed Mr. Dresbach that night? Was it myself or was it other detectives? To be honest with you, I'm not sure
Sure.
if it was asked or not.
You did.
Okay.
Okay? And when he brought up diversion to you, we already covered this, you didn't investigate it, right?
Correct.
Okay. And are you aware that that was also a concern of Talon Schroyer?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, I've very able co-counsel just pointed out that I haven't explained what diversion means. Can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what diversion is? Drug diversion.
No, I can't.
So when Dresbach brought up diversion to you, you didn't ask him, what do you mean diversion? What is that?
No, I did not.
Are you aware now that diversion means stealing drugs?
No, you just told me that's what it means, so
So you, up until this moment in time, you had no idea what diversion meant?
no, sir.
Would have been a good idea to have someone consulting with you while you're investigating this case, right?
I suppose so, yes.
Had a lot of challenges for you?
Yes, sir.
Now, you're aware that Talon Schroyer was involved in Simmons, right, for 1,000 micrograms,
Correct.
okay? Were you aware that he also approved Brandy McDonald's 1,000?
No, I was not.
Okay. You were given a list of the names and the dates of each individual, right?
Right.
And let me clear this up. You were given the names of the employee, in this case, the pharmacist and the nurses, right?
Correct.
And the date of the dose amount, right?
Right.
And the amount of the dose, right?
Correct.
So you knew when you were talking to Talon Schroyer for 1,000 micrograms that he had approved 1,000 for Brandy McDonald. Or you had that information, right?
When we talked to Talon on the 7th or the 8th, is that when you're talking?
Yes.
You know, Mr. Baez, I'm going to have to ask you once again, if you want me to be specific about, I looked at all of them, I read all of them, but I can't remember all of those. Maybe you can, but I can't. So if you want me to look at my reports to refresh my memory on what people said, I'd be more than happy to.
Okay. Fair to say you have a very important job, right, sir?
Yes, sir.
In fact, you investigate people for murder, right?
Right.
And if someone is arrested for murder, they face serious consequences, right? One's life, their family, it all could be affected by this, right?
Yes, sir.
So it's important for you to not only be thorough, but also to document things, right? And in anticipation for raising your hand in a court of law in a murder
Your
case,
Honor, objection.
did you do any research, or did you go back and review your notes and your police reports?
Sustained.
Sir, I just told you I did.
No, I sustained the objection, rephrase.
Sure. Did you go back prior to testifying today and look at your police reports in this case?
Yes, sir.
And in addition to your reports, you also have a summary of every interview you did, right?
Correct.
And you knew you were going to be asked questions by me, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So in light of that, you were also instructed by the prosecutors to prepare, right?
Yes, sir.
And you did so.
Yes.
Okay. So my question to you before we got sidetracked was, you had in your possession the knowledge that Brandy McDonald for 1,000 micrograms was previously approved by Talon Schroyer, the person who started this whole case.
That question's been asked and answered.
I don't think I answered it.
Yeah, I think he did, but
Okay. Can I ask him just to answer that last one?
can you answer the question again so we can get moving here?
What was it again,
You
sir?
had the date,
See, that's the
January
problem.
14th, and 1,000 micrograms. right?
Correct. Right.
And you knew the guy to talk to was Talon Schroyer about that, right?
Yes.
And you knew he had approved that drug, that dose, correct?
I'm not going to say he approved it, you know, unless I can look at my notes.
All right, do you have your notes with you?
No, a summary.
Okay, you have your summary of investigation.
No, I do not.
Okay, let me get you a copy of that. May I approach the witness?
Well, you got a foundation question you haven't asked yet, but
Well, I wasn't gonna refresh, I don't have a pending question, I just want him, if he needs to refresh, so he can refer to it, just to move things along.
any objection?
No objection.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry, no longer.
All right, detective. I don't want us to assume, and I don't want you to guess, and I want you to try and give as best the information that you can on this case. So if you need at any time to stop and look at your notes or anything, you just let me know, okay?
Okay.
All right. So, did you also know that he approved Bonnie Austin's 600 micrograms?
Talon?
Alan Troy,
No.
okay? You were given this date, this amount, and the pharmacist who approved it, right?
Correct.
Okay, so my question to you is now, would you agree to tell this jury that you were aware that he approved this one, which is Bonnie Austin and Brandy McDonald?
Okay,
What summary are you looking
Okay,
at?
so-
If you need a moment to look,
stop, folks. You can't look at those yet. Okay?
Okay.
would it refresh your memory if you looked at your notes?
Hopefully, yes.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and do that, and then we'll talk about it afterwards.
So what is the question that you're asking me
He
about
wants to
Talon?
know about the two individuals that the one pharmacist approved. Alan, I believe, is last.
Talon Schroyer, dealing with Bonnie Austin and Brandy McDonald, specifically the dates of January 14th and September 30th.
Your Honor, if I may, anything that Mr. Schroyer would have told Detective Gillette would be hearsay. So I believe what he's asking is ultimately a hearsay answer. He'll have his chance to question Mr. Schroyer.
Okay,
It's not.
I'll note your objection, but not, we don't have that before us yet.
Thank you.
And while he's looking at that, hearsay is one of those words that makes me cringe because TV misuses what it is. It's an out-of-court statement offered for the truth of the matter asserted, but there's exceptions to it. So, better? Okay. Hearsay is one of those words that makes me cringe because TV has abused the heck out of it. Okay, it's an out-of-court statement offered for the truth of a matter asserted, and it's not proper to do so, but there are exceptions to it. So we're working our way through this. I will tell you what you can listen to and then what you can't. Fair enough?
Okay, Mr. Bias, what date was you looking at there? It's Timmons, October 24th, right?
Correct. And then Brandy McDonald, January 14th, 2018.
Okay, well, my notes that we have when we talked to Mr. Schroeder, it doesn't have any names with,
Right,
The
I know
amounts.
you didn't know the names, but you knew the dates and the dose amounts, right?
not at this time, we did not know.
You didn't have a list? Wait, you just testified that you had a list?
Let's strike what you got. Let's start with a fresh question.
Sure. Do you recall testifying earlier to this jury that the hospital gave you a list,
Yes,
right? And on that list was the dates of the dose.
that's not in these right here. These are my summaries.
I finished question,
Okay, go ahead.
On that list were the dates of the doses, correct?
Correct,
The dose amounts,
correct,
and who the pharmacist was that approved it.
correct.
Okay, so my question to you is,
Am I-
can you question Mr. Schroyer about January 14, 2018, 1,000 micrograms?
I can't answer that question. I don't have that other list in front of me that we were given by the doctor, by the experts.
Now, you're here to testify about the investigation as a summary witness, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now, as part of that, you're not only during direct examination, you did not only testify about the work you did, you testified about the work your team did, right?
Correct.
Including the prosecutors, right?
Yes,
Okay, so you were also told to become familiar with all of the interviews, right?
correct.
Okay, so, are you aware that Detective Courtroom, this gentleman back here in the back,
Yes, sir.
questioned Mr. Schroyer about this specific dose?
I am now.
Okay, you are not?
Yeah.
Okay, are you aware as to whether Mr. Kroom asked Talon Schroyer or followed up in any way, shape, or form, why are you reporting this now when you approved something 9 months earlier of the same dose amount?
I can't answer that.
Okay, so you don't know,
I don't know, no.
okay? Do you know if Mr. Kroom asked Mr. Schroyer or followed up in any way, why are you bringing this up now when just a couple weeks earlier, actually, what is that, like 5 days earlier, you approved this dose? You're
Yes, sir.
aware of that,
No, sir.
okay? Now, Ms. Kavanaugh, on December 11th, 2017, was also approved by Talon Schroyer, right?
I can't answer that.
Are you aware of what's going on in this investigation, sir?
Objection, Your Honor, argument.
Staying argumentative.
Did you look into?
Strike the question. You disregard the question, ladies and gentlemen.
Sir, I'm, you know I have a responsibility here. I'm not trying to be argumentative with you.
Okay.
You did research this case, right?
Okay, I'll explain this one more time. I looked at everything.
I need you to answer my question. You did research.
I'm trying to. I looked at everything. I read over everything. There's a ton of information in this case package, as you can see. And I can't remember all of it specifically,
I'm aware there's a ton of information.
okay?
I've had to
So-
explain myself. So my question to you, sir, is, do you know if anyone followed up, whether it was you or one of your team members, followed up and asked Mr. Schroyer why he approved Ms. Kavanaugh, Ms. Blake, I'm sorry, Ms. Austin, and Ms. Brandy McDonald previously?
No,
Okay. Why now? Did you ask him that?
no, sir.
Now, you had learned in the course of your investigation that these doses were being done for years, right?
Years.
Yes. Did any of these witnesses advise you that this has been going on for years?
You mean the nurses and so forth?
Yeah, nurses or pharmacists.
Yeah, not the high ones at the end, 1,000 and 2,000. But yes, I mean, it goes back to, as you can see on the board there, 2014.
Now, when your team questioned Mr. Schroyer about Ms. McDonald, did you see or become aware that Mr. Schroyer had conversations with other pharmacists about these dose amounts?
Yes,
Okay, so it was commonly known from the pharmacists about these dose amounts, correct?
Objection as to what the pharmacist did know.
Sustained as the speculation, rephrase.
Was it brought to your attention, and did you uncover this during your investigation, that it was no secret that these doses were being given, right?
Can you rephrase that again?
No.
Okay,
I want an answer to that question.
Okay, did you understand the question?
no, I did
Okay,
not.
all right, then I'll rephrase it if you don't understand. My question to you, sir, is you became aware while you were interviewing all these people that it was no secret that these doses were being given, right?
Correct,
And that the pharmacists knew about it and the nurses knew about it, right?
correct.
And it was right, well, when you got the records, you found out it was right there in the records, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay? Now,
No, we have one.
now, sir, I want to talk to you about the process of how this all works in terms of the doses, okay?
Mhm.
Now, prior to walking through the door and talking to these folks, you had no idea how things get done at Mount Carmel, right?
Correct.
Okay. Were you aware as to whether there was a policy as to a maximum dose you could give?
No, it was our understanding there wasn't a maximum dosage. Like you said before, it depends on each individual.
And Mount Carmel did not give you any policy that said these are our maximum doses and this doctor violated that, right?
Not maximum doses, correct?
Okay. You also became aware by talking to these folks that the literature in the field is very, well, there is no maximum dose in the literature, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And in fact, multiple witnesses told you.
Objection. Hearsay.
Okay, you're right. Let me rephrase that. You also became aware, sir, that there is even information or in the literature that says one could live longer on these doses, right?
Objection, Your Honor, outside the scope of his knowledge.
How did you get aware of it?
Are you aware of that?
No, sir.
Okay.
Let me ask you about
How you guys holding up? You okay?
Okay. If I can have a moment, Judge, I want to find what I'm going to ask you about.
Okay. Let's call him up, David.
All rise.
Remember the admonition, I'll see you in 10 minutes. Don't be shy about that, Troy. Okay, you are currently on the stand. You may not discuss your testimony at all,
Yes, sir.
okay? You can talk about the facts of the case, but you can't discuss how you testified. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
Okay? Take your 10 minutes. I see you guys forced David to have the last piece of cake. Okay. Continue on, Mr. Bias.
Thank you, Your Honor. Okay, Detective, we left off, and I asked you if anyone had advised you, or did you learn that the literature shows that perhaps these doses could extend the life?
Objection, Your Honor, I believe that's been asked and answered.
I'm bringing up where we left off.
Okay, I'll give you a little leeway, but let's get to it.
You recall that question?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you recall speaking to a Derek Dreyer?
Yes.
Okay, and do you recall that he mentioned that there's a lot of research out there?
Objection, hearsay.
Rephrase.
Did you learn that there was a lot of research out there from Mr. Dreyer?
Objection,
Wow.
hearsay.
Okay.
Just
Did you
saying.
learn- I'll rephrase it. Did he bring to your attention that there's research out there that shows, or it could potentially show, that these doses in fentanyl could
Objection,
extend life?
hearsay, Your Honor.
I'm just asking.
Okay, I'll let that question go. Do you understand the question?
Could you repeat it one more time,
He
please?
asked you if during your interview with a particular witness, did you come to an understanding, I think is the word he was looking for, as to the issue of the acceptance of the dosage? Does that adequately cover it?
There's research that prolongs life, as opposed to haste.
Do you remember anything like that?
Could I look at my summary here real quick with Mr. Dreyer?
Let's save time, go ahead.
No problem.
I know, we're talking, all those people talking at the same time, and this class stinks. While he's looking at that, ladies and gentlemen, we may switch courtrooms. I know you guys are having problems up here, and it's driving me a little crazy. Okay, so it'll be a little bit more compact though. Okay? Well, I know, the coffins, I get it, okay? That's the running joke for those things. But we're investigating that there because under court order, this is a joint courtroom and I can't tear those down. Okay, you up to snuff there?
Just about, sir. All right, Mr. Baez, I'm looking at his summary here. And
Does that refresh your memory? To answer his question?
yes, sir. I don't see anywhere in here where he's saying that it extends life.
If I showed you a transcript, might that refresh your recollection as to what actually?
Okay, well, let's ask it in proper format. You're going from a different way.
Sure. Would it refresh your recollection if I showed you the transcript, sir?
Yes, sir.
Of the interview?
We do not have a copy of any of these transcripts.
I have shown counsel the
You did show me
portion.
that one, but just for a minute.
Okay,
Certainly didn't have the chance to verify authenticity.
I understand. Okay. You have a certified transcript.
Yes, I have the transcript.
Okay, that was my question.
I'm
You
sorry.
have a certified transcript.
Okay. I have a transcript. It's not certified. I believe I can still use it to refresh his recollection, but I also have the audio, if need be, to play for him.
Okay. You can show it to him.
May I approach?
Your Honor, I believe this is going to be based solely upon hearsay again. Mr. Dreyer will be here to testify. He can ask these questions to Mr. Dreyer.
Well, I understand that, but he's trying to refresh his memory as to the interview. I'll permit it.
Approach, Your Honor.
Yeah, we can approach. Ladies and gentlemen, talk amongst yourself. David must be still enjoying his cake in the back. Oh, David, get out there. Darcy threw you under the bus today. They expect juggling. Okay? He's got back injuries, ladies and gentlemen. He was entertaining.
And then a couple lines after to refresh your recollection.
Okay. Okay.
Does that refresh your memory?
Yes, sir. He did say that in the interview.
Okay.
Okay, then that puts us in the problem. We're talking about your understanding,
Yes, sir.
okay?
So, sir, after finding this out, after finding out that these doses, that there's research out there that potentially these doses could extend life and not hasten it, did you ask any follow-up questions after that?
No. Anybody that we asked follow-up questions to all told us the same thing.
In fact, the very next thing you say is, I can't think of anything else, right?
Mhm.
Is that a yes?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now, my question to you is, after getting this information, did you do research to see if perhaps there is literature and studies out there that show that fentanyl, given at end-of-life care, could potentially extend life as opposed to hastening it?
No, I don't recall.
You mentioned earlier to this jury that you follow the evidence, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, I realize that this information is not what you may have been looking for, but don't you feel it was your responsibility to follow that?
Yes, sir.
Now, you also uncovered, sir, that there were essentially two pharmacists who brought this to the attention of the pharmacy manager, right?
Correct.
Okay, and that other pharmacist was Mr. Dresbach, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, now, you know that Mr. Dresbach was involved in Rebecca Walls' case, right?
Yes.
Okay, and that was for 1,000 micrograms, right?
Correct.
Okay. Did you know that he also approved Ryan Hayes 2,000? Just a year earlier?
No, I did not.
Okay. You eventually got the medical records, right?
Yes, sir.
And Well, at that time, you also had the date and Ryan Hayes' dose amounts, right?
Correct.
Okay. So you knew about this, that they had previously, both him and Schroeder, had previously approved these dose amounts in the past. Did you ever go back and ask them? Why now?
No, I did not.
And then once the issue of diversion came up, I know you didn't know what it means, but once the issue of theft of drugs came up, did you think that maybe that's the issue that started this whole thing? Since they had previously approved doses even higher?
We didn't find any evidence of that, so, no.
Meaning, any evidence of what, diversion?
Right, we didn't find any evidence that anybody had been stealing any medications.
And that's because you didn't even know what diversion was, right?
Correct.
So
But I know what theft of medications is.
you know what that is, but if a witness tells you something that you don't understand, the
Okay,
police work
asked and answered.
to, I'm asking a different question. If someone tells you something you don't understand during the course of an investigation, good police work means, let me ask them, what do you mean by that, right?
Correct?
Okay, you didn't do that in this case,
No, I didn't.
this important murder case.
Okay, let's rephrase.
Now, there was a lot that you didn't understand about what they were telling you, correct?
Yes, sir.
In fact, you were hearing phrases and procedures that you're not familiar with, right?
Yes, sir.
And they were explaining to you why they approved the doses that they approved, right?
By the pharmacist,
Yes.
some of the doses they didn't approve. It was pushed through
I'll get to that in a
during
minute.
the override.
I'll get to that in a minute. But for the ones that you did discuss with them, that they approved, they gave you the reasons why, right?
As far as why they approved it,
Yeah.
I don't know that we asked them. I assumed that if they felt the dose was,
Objection, Your Honor, if he doesn't know, assumption is inappropriate.
Yeah, I don't want you to assume.
oh, sorry.
Detective Gillette, are you telling this jury that you never even asked the pharmacist why they approved the dose amounts in this case for a murder case?
Which dose amounts are you talking about?
Now, I'm speaking generally because I don't want to get into hearsay. When you're questioning a pharmacist, I recognize some remembered, some didn't, right?
Right.
Okay. So the ones that they remembered, are you telling this jury you never asked them why they approved these dose amounts?
Some of them would say that they would talk to the,
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
Same.
My question is, did you ask them why?
no,
Now, you found out today that they're 50% responsible for those.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Looking back, do you think that might have been a good question to ask them?
yes, sir.
Now, part of the, I guess, part of your investigation as a detective is to investigate to see if there was any deception going on by way of any of the parties, correct?
Your
Yes.
Honor, I'm going to object in the approach.
Yes. Talk amongst yourselves, guys. I know you got new subject matter to discuss with your neighbor.
Yes, sir.
Sir, part of being a detective is to look for things, well, let me rephrase that. When you're investigating someone, some of the things that you look for are perhaps if things are done out in the open or whether they're done in secret, right?
Yes, sir.
You came to know that each and every one of these orders are in the medical records, right?
Yes, sir.
And you also came to know that that there was never a question in terms of the orders, correct, as to the dose amounts.
A question that we posed? Did I ask her, what do you ask, a question about what?
That they were out in the open. There was no secret dose given in any of these patients to anyone,
No, sir.
okay? So everything's in the medical records, right?
Yes,
And you also learn that there's a process, right? Of how the doses get administered.
yes, sir.
You learn that the doctor either inputs the order or,
Objection, Your Honor, testifying.
If it's a summary, I'm gonna give them a little attitude,
and I'm just giving the process, I'm not.
okay?
You understand that the doctor either enters the order or gives a verbal order, right?
Correct.
And then it goes to the nurse, right?
Yes,
And the nurse gets the medication or enters the order into the medical record, right? Or both?
you mean sends it to the pharmacist?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay. And then the pharmacist is supposed to either approve or reject it, right?
yes,
Now, are you aware, sir, that subsequent to all of this, there is an attending physician that reviews the entire medical record?
say that again, it reviews the medical
Are you aware?
records
Yes.
as far as the dosages of the prescriptions? Is that what you're asking?
Let me ask it this way. Are you aware what an attending physician is?
I assume he works with the doctor there.
Okay, you don't know,
I don't know. No.
okay?
Okay, so you don't know that what an attending physician is or what he or she is responsible for?
No, sir.
Did you investigate thoroughly the entire process
Objection, Your Honor.
of how these doses are administered and documented?
I'll permit it.
Yes, we thought we did, yes.
So you would have come across the discharge summary written by the attending physician in each and every one of these patients, right?
I don't remember seeing that. I said, I suppose again. I don't remember seeing
I
that.
can't hear you.
Oh, sorry.
We don't
Your
remember?
answer.
She can't hear you, please.
What was your answer?
Repeat your answer.
I
You don't remember.
don't remember now.
Okay?
You got all the medical records, right?
Correct.
And at the end of, and the medical records are chronological, right?
Yes,
Okay, and at the very end of all the medical records of everyone who passed away at Mount Carmel, there is a physician that gives a summary of everything that occurred, right?
I don't know. I'll be honest with you, we did not look at every,
Okay, relax. You don't have a question pending, okay? I know it's been a long afternoon.
You're saying you didn't look at every what, sir?
every medical record. We didn't at the office. We did with the experts. Looking at those medical records, most of the stuff you don't understand, what everything is saying and things like that. So, we tried to look at a couple of them when we first got them, and we really couldn't make heads or tails out of them.
Since you couldn't make heads or tails out of these medical records, sir, did you at any time consult with a medical professional who could guide you through to ensure you're doing the right thing?
Yeah, Dr. Roth.
Okay, the guy who worked at Trinity.
Yes, sir.
and he sat down with you and went over each and every medical record.
Of the 22, the 25 that we got down to, he went over, the medical, we looked through all of them and he went over everything with us.
My question to you is, he sat down with you and went over every single medical record and what's inside of it. Is that your testimony, sir?
Well, since you put it that way, he went over medical records with us. I can't tell you he went over all of them, but he went over the medical records with us and explained to us how, to look at these charts and so forth.
Okay. So let's break this down, sir. Each and every one of these in yellow is a murder case, right?
Correct.
Okay. And it's a very serious thing, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you've asked that a couple times. Move
You
on.
as a detective know that it's your responsibility to investigate these things thoroughly, right?
Yes, sir.
So when you say Dr. Roth from Trinity sat down with you, are you referring to a summary, the Excel spreadsheet summary that he went over with you?
No, he had the medical records. And like I said, I cannot sit here and tell you that he went over all 25 of them.
Who did you not go over with Dr. Roth?
I can't tell you that either. I don't know, to be honest with you.
But you arrested this man for all of these, right?
Yes, sir.
And each and every one stands on its own as an individual case, right?
Correct.
But you didn't go through all of the medical records.
We knew that this was going to be a medical expert case, is what this was going to boil down to, this case.
So in light of that, knowing that this was going to be a medical expert case, you just left it up to the experts.
Yes, we did. We had the experts look at it, go through all the medical records, and explain to us why each one of these cases, should be, part of this investigation.
And at no time did any of these experts go over these records and tell you to ask specific witnesses about A, B, C, or D.
No, sir.
And when you refer to experts, you're referring to the experts that were retained later on in this case, correct?
Correct.
I believe as early as March of 2019, correct? Or as late as March, I should say.
I can't answer that accurately. I'm not sure. I know there were experts that Mr. O'Brien and Mr. Lowe obtained.
3 months after you had talked to these witnesses, right?
Yes, sir.
And they are experts that are paid by the state from throughout the country, right?
I would assume so, yes. I don't know.
I want you to assume.
I don't know. I know they're experts,
Now, I want to make sure I cover everything with you, sir. The first person you spoke with was Randy Miles, right?
Yes,
He's the manager of the pharmacy,
correct.
okay? He had never even met Dr. Husel, correct?
Best of my recollection, yes.
And had never spoken to him either, correct?
Correct.
Let me ask you, in all of this time, other than Timothy Fitzpatrick and Danny Millett, did anyone come to speak to Dr. Husel that you found out during your investigation and told him not to order these doses?
Did anyone go to Mr. Husel and say that?
Yeah.
From the hospital?
Yeah.
I don't believe so.
Okay. You became aware also, sir, that after he was fired, he was finally called in by Mr. Swanner, right?
Correct.
And Mr. Swanner advised you, who was at that meeting?
I believe it was Dr. Swanner and Dr. Ralston, I believe.
And the two of them brought it to Dr. Husel's attention on November 26th, correct?
I believe that was the date, yes, sir.
That's after all of these, right?
Correct.
And that was the very first time anyone had ever spoken to him, right? As far as you know.
As far as I know, yes.
And when they spoke with him, Dr. Swanner decided that they were going to create a policy, right?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Did you become aware that subsequent to this conversation, they decided to start a policy?
Objection again, Your Honor.
Sustained without a foundation. Sustained.
Sir, when speaking to Dr. Swanner, he actually gave you a document outlining this meeting, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and you also had the opportunity to speak with him about this meeting, right?
Yes, my sergeant did.
And that would have been very important to you because that's the first time anybody talked to Dr. Husel, right?
Correct.
So in this document and also from your interviews of Dr. Swanner, you found out that now they were going to have a policy, correct?
I can't remember if they put a policy in after this or not. I mean,
And that's if they did that.
I can't remember.
You learned that they were going to now create a new policy, right? Would it help you?
Yep. Can I
refresh
look at this?
Yeah, 50 note to chart, I think it's called.
Which summary is it?
Yes, the note to chart. It's in the center.
Okay. What
Yeah.
part of this are you asking
Look it
about?
over and see if it refreshes your recollection in relation to the policy.
Okay, yes, sir. I see it here at the bottom
Okay.
with Dr. Sanama.
Yes. Now, sir, it came to your attention that on November 26th, Mount Carmel Chief of Medicine decided that they're going to now have a policy for maximum doses of fentanyl, right?
Yes.
And that they wanted Dr. Husel to be part of that committee.
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
Sustained.
Are you aware as to whether they wanted Dr. Husel to participate in creating these dose amounts?
Objection, hearsay.
Yeah. Sustained.
This is a document that you received, correct?
Mhm.
You picked it up from Mr. Swan.
Yes, sir.
Did you at any time ask Dr. Swanner? You guys came to us thinking that this is a murder case, but yet you want him to create a new policy for you? Explain that,
Objection,
sir.
Your Honor,
Okay.
hearsay.
Sustained.
Did you ever follow up with Dr. Swanner and ask him why they wanted Dr. Husel to help create a policy?
Objection.
Sustained.
Did you have any follow-up conversations with Dr. Swanner about this policy?
No, sir.
Never asked him a single thing.
No, sir.
Now, I'm gonna go back to this specific process that we discussed, and I'm referring to Exhibit MCDZ, or is that a 2? 2, okay, 2. Sir, you came to, are you familiar with a scan to order is?
A scan to orders?
Yeah.
I would assume it's when you scan something in, it,
You know your can of soup.
Are you familiar with the phrase?
no,
You're not familiar with the phrase?
no, sir.
Okay, but it came to your attention during the course of your investigation that nurses were scanning the vials and that somehow that circumvented the pharmacy, right?
Say that again. They were,
Yeah, sure.
okay,
That they were scanning the vials,
right.
and by doing it this way, it circumvented or it never, let me rephrase it, it never went to the pharmacy.
Well, I know that as the override system is what, I know that as, that they can go in and override the Pyxis machine to get the medication out.
Okay? I think you're mistaken. And let's discuss.
Okay, well, let's ask a question.
Sure.
Your
Okay.
commentary is secondary.
Okay, sir, are you aware that there was a way that some nurses, on some occasions, were entering these orders and they didn't go to the pharmacy?
No, sir.
Never made aware of that?
No, sir.
Are you not aware, sir, that that's what sparked this whole thing, this whole case?
Objection
has been
answered.
Are you aware?
He's already told you he wasn't aware.
Okay. How did it come well, let me strike that. Why did Talon Schroeder tell you, sorry, let me strike that. Why did you think Talon Schroeder brought this to the pharmacy manager's attention in the first place?
Objection, Your Honor, I don't believe you can talk about what Talon Schroeder was thinking.
Well, I can't speculate as to what he was thinking.
Yeah.
I think the question was, what did he think?
Yes.
And again, that would be a foundational issue.
Sir, you talked to Talon Schroeder,
Yes,
and you talked to him about how this whole case got started.
yes,
Okay, and in the process of which he explained that to you, right?
yes.
What did you think brought this to his attention?
Objection speculative again.
Sustained.
The amount that was used,
Okay. Sustained. Let's ask a new question.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
trying to think of a way to ask this question before it's approved. Give me a second. I know there's a way. He's telling me no. Detective. While you're investigating this case, you mentioned earlier that it's important for you to know how the case got started, right?
right.
Are you saying that you don't know that this whole case started with a stand order?
I know it first got started with, that was with Mr. Timmons, and that wasn't reported when we first had the meeting. It was just Walls and Penix.
Right? But when you spoke to Mr. Talon Schroeder, he told you not to complain to Mr. Miles, his manager, right?
Yeah, he thought it was an excessive
Objection,
dose.
Your Honor, as to what he said.
Sustained as to what he said.
So, did he advise you, or did you become aware that that specific order never went to the pharmacy.
No,
Did you know that this was going on at Mount Carmel, sir? And I'll clear it up if you want me to.
yeah, I take you too.
Did you know that there were some nurses on some occasions were scanning controlled substances, and somehow, because of the way the system was set up, it was not going to the pharmacy?
Your Honor, objection, it's assuming facts, not in evidence. We have nothing to support it. What nurses,
Okay.
what dates?
I'm not.
What processes?
Okay, I'll permit the question. Do you understand the question?
No,
Okay.
You don't understand the question.
you asked if I knew or knew that nurses were scanning it and it wasn't going to the pharmacy.
Right.
No,
You had no idea.
no.
Are there not multiple cases here that never went to the pharmacy?
There's multiple cases that was overridden.
No, I'm asking you specifically. We'll get into overrides in a moment. But my question to you, sir, is are you not aware that there are multiple cases here that never went to the pharmacy? A pharmacist never saw the orders.
No,
Do you know which pharmacist approved Troy Allison's dose?
no, not right off the top of my head, no.
You want to check your notes?
It wouldn't be in here. It's on the chart that we got. You say Troy Hollis?
Troy Allison. Yes. Yes, Troy Allison.
It's on the chart that we had. I couldn't tell you, sir.
Okay. Mr. Timmons, do you know if, I kind of already asked you about Mr. Timmons, let me move on. Sandra Castle. Are you aware, sir, as to whether this order ever went to the pharmacy?
Not without looking at, but the outline that we had.
So you can't testify right now, and you don't have any notes there that would give you that indication?
No, sir.
Okay, that's a compound question. You're gonna go this way.
Yes,
Let's
sir.
keep it nice and simple.
I will. This is hard stuff. Now, sir, what about Jeremiah Hodge? Are you aware as to whether that dose ever went to the pharmacy?
No, I'm not.
And it's your testimony that the fact that that controlled substances were being given with no pharmacy approval was ever an issue in this case?
We looked into this from the override system. Okay? What you're talking about, to be honest with you, I don't know what you're talking about. I know the nurses scanned the medication in. It was never told to us that it bypassed completely the pharmacist. I mean, it was explained to us that they scan it, it goes to the pharmacist, they wait for approval. If they don't get the approval, then at sometimes the defendant would tell them, just go ahead and override the system and they'd get the medications out.
Okay. Do you remember speaking to a Wesley Black?
Yes,
Mr. Black is a nurse, right?
correct.
And he was involved in a couple of these cases, right?
Walls and Penix, yes.
Okay. Now, Walls is one there. Did he not, or do you recall whether he informed you that,
Objection, hearsay.
did you learn
Use
from?
the I word,
I'm sorry,
use the I word, inform.
were you informed?
You can't use that word.
You just told me to use it.
No, I said you used it, that's why she objected.
Oh, okay. You become aware, sir, after speaking to Mr. Black, that the Walls, Ms. Walls's case bypassed the pharmacy review.
If you're asking me if it was overridden, then yes.
No, that's not what I'm asking.
I don't know then.
Okay. Counsel. I misspoke. It was on Ms. Penix
Okay.
while discussing that. May I approach the witness to refresh his recollection?
Can something refresh your recollection?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I'll show you the transcript and highlight it for you.
Okay.
Can I get that back?
Yeah, since you did bypass it.
Does that refresh your recollection?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that there were orders being entered that bypassed the pharmacy review, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now let's get into overrides, okay, because I think there might be a little confusion. You're aware that if, okay, in this process, the way it's supposed to work is the doctor gives the order, the nurse gets the medicate or enters the medication order, pharmacy reviews, then the nurse gets the medication from the Pyxis machine, right?
Correct.
Your Honor, I'm going to object. This has been asked and answered. Well,
I'm using it to set up my question.
Okay, I'll give you a little leeway, it's transition, but let's get to the point.
Now, you became aware, sir, that on a number of occasions, what was happening was prior to the pharmacist reviewing the order, the nurses were overriding the Pyxis machine, right?
Correct.
Is that a yes?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Now, that still allowed the pharmacist to see the order later on, correct?
After it had been administered, yes.
Yes. And they could approve it either prospectively, which means before the dose is given, right?
Correct.
Okay. Or retrospectively after it's given, correct?
Correct.
There's also the ability to do it simultaneously, meaning the nurse is entering in the order and they're reviewing it basically at the same time. Correct? Is that a yes?
Correct.
Okay. So when you speak of overrides, we're talking about orders that actually got to the pharmacy but were overridden before the pharmacist got to approve them, correct?
Correct.
But you also learned that they could still approve them retroactively, right?
Right.
Now, if there was a problem with the dose amount, the pharmacist could file a complaint, bring it up the chain, right?
objection, Your Honor, outside the scope of his knowledge.
Did you come to find out, sir, that a pharmacist could complain?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the very first time a pharmacist ever complained was Jeffrey Timmons.
Yeah, James Timmons.
And that was a dose that never went to the pharmacy, right?
Okay, that's been asked and answered a
Okay.
couple times.
Did you find out that it was a nurse who brought it to Talon Schroeder's attention? That Mr. Timmons.
1,000.
The Timmons order, yes. That's how we found out about that order.
The Schroyer,
Yes.
if I could look at my summary here.
Sure.
Okay, and you're talking about the 1,000 micrograms, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you say a nurse brought it to his attention?
Correct. What are you referring to, if I can ask? What are you looking at?
Summary number 11?
And that's,
Whoa. He was refreshing his memory. Let's not go off on another tangent until we get that part done.
the document that you're using to refresh your recollection is basically your summary of what the interview was.
Correct,
Correct?
correct.
All right. But you knew in anticipation for your testimony today that you have to review all these statements, not just the summary, right?
Objection,
Asked and answered.
Sir, did you review the whole statements of what your interviews were?
Objection asked and answered also.
It has been sustained.
Okay. Is the fact that a nurse
Hold on.
brought it to,
Stop for a second. Can you get done in the next 3 minutes?
probably not.
Okay, well, there's nothing wrong with that answer, okay? But I have a promise I have to honor.
I'm thinking goodness if we had the plexiglass.
We're gonna stop for the day. Go ahead, have a seat, relax for a second. You can step off there. I have to talk to Jerry about something. Okay. Remember my earlier instructions? Detective? Detective? Remember my earlier instructions to you, they're still in force. Okay? Let's talk about two things, ladies and gentlemen. Okay? I'm about ready to go to bat for a switch of courtroom. Okay? I'm gonna look at you all first, because you guys, I mean, these guys can adapt to me. You guys, I've got you here. Is this so bad that you want to switch courtrooms? Or can you live with it?
Fine.
Well, it's the back row that I'm more concerned about. We got rid of the plexiglass up front, even though I got the structure. Back row, talk to me.
Fine.
You're fine? Okay. I'm gonna explore still to see what my options are. Okay? So I'll report back tomorrow. The other thing I want to talk about, we got some testimony about a concept called subsequent remedial measures. Okay? The change in policy. Okay? Generally, you can't consider culpability issues on that the hospital did something wrong. That's not permitted under the rule. There may be other reasons you can consider it, and we haven't gotten to those yet. But since the state of Ohio doesn't have a chance to redirect at this point in time, and I'm sending you home, I don't want that to get in your head that something's wrong here. You can't consider it for that purpose. You can consider it for other purposes, and I'll go over that later. But as to culpable state of mind, no. Understood? Now, that's a complex legal concept. I tried to get it down. But the bottom line here is, you know it happened, just you can't consider why right now. Okay? Fair enough? Anything on the record on that?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Well, you're not on the floor.
No, Your Honor, thank you.
No, sir.
Okay. Okay, remember the admonitions. We're gonna get started at 9 in the morning. No sleeping in, folks. Okay? I'm just gonna have my fun and I brought you a cake, so it's all fair.
That's totally fine, I appreciate it.
Not a problem. Okay, it's particularly important you don't start discussing it, okay? You guys got a long time before you get to that point, okay? With that, David.
All rise.
You guys have a great evening and happy birthday.
Thank you.
Second floor. Now, for the people in the audience, that means less of you will be in the room and more, and then you'll be down here watching it on the big screen.
We'll defer to your judgment on that, Your Honor. We have.
Well, I want to see about the possibility of going to 3F, but since the jury is okay right now, I'm probably not going to do it. But I just want to know what my options are for the future. So I was going to give everybody an opportunity to speak up now before I go in there and fight the den of the second floor. Yes, I'm referring to you. Any input? She needs to hear this. Let her have it.
We defer to you, Judge.
Okay?
Your Honor, if it means getting rid of the coffins and the plexiglass or to the furthest extent we can,
That's not an option.
I think really that's the main concern is if the jurors are okay and they can hear, then I think there's not really an issue at that point. I think it's really just a matter of preference and deference to the court then if we can't get rid of at least the second, I know you said it was structural, right? So if we can't get rid of it and it's another courtroom, I don't know.
Well, I got a hammer and a sledge that I can go at it. You didn't hear that, by the way. That's something you should know. Now, this morning they were complaining and you guys were better about getting your voices up. Okay, they didn't complain now when I put them on the spot. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not gonna get feedback behind the door. So I'm gonna talk to her about what my options are. Okay? And she can yell at me then.
Will we still have 2 tables for each side then?
Well, that's another issue. That's a no, I see.
Well, are you thinking, you said 3F, but that's what Judge Brown is. You mean 6F?
I don't mind kicking them out.
Well, that's a different conversation I've been
Well, I don't mind having that with them.
6F?
No, I was thinking 6F. They put down 3F, I told them 6F.
You can fit 4 tables, it's, it's tight.
It's gonna be tight on what you're in now.
Well, I would prefer the setup we have now then.
Okay,
I would agree, Your Honor.
okay, well, I'm gonna see what I can get away with in here.
All right, sir.
Okay.
Are we excused, sir?
Yeah,
Thank you.
9 o'clock promptly, guys. Don't come in at 9 and we're setting up for 10 minutes. Let's get rolling.
We do have one issue, well, 2 issues. Dr. Hagris, at least testifying via Zoom. At this point, we may be taking him out of order, if that's okay.
That's fine.
Hagris, he's in Egypt. Okay, because he has to start it because he's 7 hours behind us, or ahead of us, I forget. But at any rate, we have to have a time set.
It would currently be 10:30 their time.
Okay, so
Yeah.
Dr. Ely is our first expert. We have him scheduled for Monday. He's very concerned about being away from his ICU for too long. He's requested that we do his testimony all in one day, which, if that's all we do that day, I think it's doable, but just if we could inquire about everybody, if we could stay late that night, so he can get on a plane that night and get home instead of having to make him spend an extra night here in Columbus.
Okay, I will discuss this, because I told the jury we went till 5. I will discuss it with the jury and explain the circumstances, that we have a witness coming in, that he needs to get back to his business. And would they be willing to stick around for a while? I don't have a problem having that discussion with them.
Appreciate it, sir.
Okay?
Thank you.
Anything else?
No, sir.
Do you have the Zoom link for the witness?
We don't yet. We're not doing them tomorrow morning, are we?
What's that, sir?
We're at Zooming tomorrow morning,
That's Friday morning with.
Friday
Dr.
morning,
Hay.
okay.
Yes, we're gonna need that link.
Well, Darcy's got it, I think.
Okay, oh, Darcy's got it, okay.
If she needs anything, please let us know.
That's, I just, no.
Let's go back and talk.
I think I have a solution, but it's going to go, because I sat there.
Yeah?
Was it your second row juror?
Second row jurors.
So here's what I think. This is gonna be, how about if we make a whole, because it goes all the way up, or the sheet to protect them while they're sitting down. You know, I'm just gonna, you're just making it visual. So, you know.
Then we vote. I'm looking for problem solving. I can make it work.
Hi, how are you? So here's so what we know is there's something on that. I still where they stand up. They're sitting, so really, we either see if they need to. Oh, okay.